Welcome back to part 2 of chapter 19, Types of Agriculture. Looking at these types of agriculture, subsistent agriculture, really what it means is that people are just making a living, just getting by on agriculture. So primarily a family farm, maybe a little bit extra to sell. Incorporated into this, as an example, would be indigenous people down in the tropical rainforest that use the slash and burn method that we've talked about in class. And then after they slash and burn, then they move to a different location, and that is shifting cultivation. This tears up ecosystems. It causes extensive ecosystem degradation, because when they leave the land, that land is totally sterile, devoid of all nutrients, and it's hard then for an ecosystem to get started and the producers to start to grow back. So subsistent agriculture can be very devastating on land, just like industrialized agriculture. Nomadic herding, how does it hurt the ecosystem? By overgrazing an area. These people, they're on the move, they're moving their herds, which is good, but they either have too many animals or they're not moving fast enough. This is kind of an example of this would be sub-Saharan Africa. And this is an area where not only are they grazing herds, but you've got large grazers there, elephants, giraffes, zebras, wildebeest, and they're all using the same range. And so then you've got people actually herding animals such as goats, and it's getting overused. So then you get more desertification, so the sub-Saharan area is actually becoming more of the desert because it just won't regrow. Things that could be used, particularly in the tropical rainforest, intercropping and polyculture. And this is a type of farming where it is very labor intensive, which subsistent agriculture they don't have big tractors. They're not, polluting our environment with CO2 because they're not using any mechanization really. They're hurting us because they're taking trees out, but they can use intercropping and polyculture. And this is basically getting people to plant different species all together so that they're intermingled. The thought being that different species take different nutrients and give different nutrients. Therefore, it rounds out the soil fertility. It also alleviates one big plot being barren for a while, and so it decreases soil erosion. Also helps these farmers in that they have different crops and they don't rely solely on one crop, and that way they have food for an extended period of time. They might not have a lot of variety in their diet, but they have something to eat that's relatively healthy, and that they don't have a big expenditure trying to get help for just one planting season or just one harvesting season. They've got a little bit of everything, and they tend it all year long, and they can use the same amount of help, and usually that's their children. Industrialized agriculture, a lot of CO2 here, synthetic fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides. There's a huge energy input into this. So that's what we do. That is our type of agriculture. Challenges with industrialized agriculture tend to be really keeping the genetic diversity. As we domesticate, we lose diversity. And that loss of diversity can hurt the food supply as a whole. by decreasing the ability of a species to ward off pests, creating through mutation a super pest that would annihilate the entire crop. And if you're using the same seed all over the world, then that has the potential to move and spread throughout the world. So genetic diversity within a species is a good thing, and we're eliminating that through using the same seeds, some of them GMOs, and they're giving higher production. That's why all the farmers want them. And also by breeding animals to have a certain type, and therefore getting rid of all the extra variant forms or allele forms in the gene pool, because we want one type of animal. Looking at this is just like the line graph that you saw a few slides back in part 1. And basically it's showing you that annual yields have continued to raise. And basically this is because, first of all, they started selective breeding with crops. And that was much like Mendel. They took pollen from one species and pollinated another species until they came up with the certain type that they wanted for the crop that gave them the largest yield, that had most of the characteristics that they wanted. And so that, and also using pesticides and herbicides, giving it a better chance to survive, these crops have just blossomed, so to speak. This was your case in point, talking about the Green Revolution. This is where we were looking for these plants to end hunger and increase yields. And basically what they were doing, hybridization, is taking this tall conventional plant and the high yielding plant, but notice how skinny that high yielding plant is. Very good, low to the ground, has a nice head on it, so there's lots of seed. But because it is skinny, it allows sunlight to get down in, and then they're going to have weed problems. So if they bred it with the tall conventional plant, we got a lower tillering idiotype, and basically what that does is alleviates the need to till land or get rid of the weeds, and then also gives us a nice yield. So this is what they were using to increase yields on the fields, and using selective breeding before they had the ability to use GMOs, before they knew what the genome for the crops were. How do we increase livestock yields? Hormone supplements and antibiotics and feed sources. This is how we do it. You can see down here what we're looking at, percent resistance. So this is basically showing how resistant the livestock are becoming to these antibiotics, and they're showing a little bit of resistance, so that now some of the feedlots are backing off giving the antibiotics, and they're actually starting to see less sickness, and therefore their yield on the hoof, or the amount of meat they're getting, has stabilized. Hormone supplements are fed to the cattle to get them to grow faster. It's just like giving you guys taking steroids. It makes their muscles bigger faster. So also used in milk cows to get them to give more milk. Good, bad? I don't know. Again, this is one place that data is not specifically stating that there's anything wrong with it, but there are possible links to puberty, early puberty, and possibly cancer. But early puberty too, our foods have higher fat content in them, and going back to that body fat to body mass ratio, more estrogen is produced. So it could be the type of diet, or it could be the hormones causing early onset puberty. The gene revolution, GMOs or genetically modified food. They modify the food. Rice is to add nutrients. As I told you, rice is nutrient poor. So there's the ability to add vitamins to this. Pest resistance and drought resistance are huge. By using a certain species of bacteria, which is called Bt, the DNA from the bacteria create an enzyme, and a lot of pests don't like that enzyme. So the pests that eat on corn, as I've talked about in class, and tomatoes particularly, they can take the DNA or the gene that makes the enzyme, insert it into the seed, into the DNA sequence of the corn and the tomatoes, and get tomatoes and corn that bugs don't like. So we get pretty vegetables when we go to the grocery store. The drought resistance is huge, huge. We're using up our water for agriculture, and we need water and we need food. So this is a huge advancement in science. We have to decide, is it bad? And certainly we don't want it to be a health risk, but is it? And jury's out on that. People are concerned because these things aren't labeled. Foods aren't labeled, and what if somebody's allergic to something? What if they use DNA from a peanut? And because peanuts could, have resistance to certain things. What about if we're making everything identical, which we talked about monoculture already, and it could spread disease. So if you look down here, genetically modified crops, we're the leader in genetically modified crops. Argentina is a paltry second, and then you have other countries all lumped together back there. Everywhere but Europe. Europe does not allow anything to be made by GMOs. Food safety. Who makes your food safe? The USDA and the USFDA. USDA is responsible for meat and poultry, and the Food and Drug Administration is everything else, from produce, eggs, milk, seafood, canned foods, everything that comes into the country. Bacteria is basically what we're looking at. This is the thing that makes us the most sick, and Salmonella and E. coli are the most prevalent, and they are introduced while the meat's being produced, processing, when you're cutting something up, and distribution and preparation of food. So you can get contamination from anywhere, basically, on your eggs, on your meat, on your cheese, on your vegetables. So it's always a good idea to cook everything. Obviously you can't cook cheese all the time, I guess you melt it, but to be very careful where you buy things, and to know that they're coming from approved American sources. A lot of our foods are processed, and when we process them, a lot of times We are cooking out the nutrients. When you pasteurize, you're cooking out the nutrients. When you can, you're cooking out the nutrients. Curing, you're adding lots of salt, and irradiating, it's, you know, killing all the bugs, but I don't know what the radiation does for you. Possibly not good. Freezing is probably the best at keeping vitamins, so frozen foods, or drying is a good way if you have a dehydrator. Additives, in order to make things look pretty, to make them have a little better taste or texture, sugar and salt are the most common additives added, but certainly artificial colors, and some people are allergic to some of those colors. And that's curb appeal, basically, or supermarket appeal. Antioxidants are used to prevent oxidation or basically breakdown of tissue. Nitrates and nitrites, also possibilities of those being linked to cancer, high blood pressure, and you get those in like ham. Well, there's a ham. And this will be the end of part 2. This is what we did in class, and we took each one of these issues, talked about it, and then we went on and on the board told how we could remedy each one of these. So this is the bulk of what this chapter is about, but I feel like we've done quite a bit with it in class rather than to talk about it at this point. So this will be the end of part 2. I'll see you in part 3.